All right, our next amazing speaker is Laura Carstensen, and she's going to talk about the innovation and disruption of our current economic and social systems by the fact that we're all going to live way longer. Laura is the founding director of the Stanford Center for Longevity, and for more than 25 years, her research has been supported continuously by the National Institute of Aging, and she's currently supported through a prestigious Merit Award. She's the author of the book called A Long, Bright Future: Happiness, Health, and Financial Security in the Age of Increased Longevity. Laura, welcome on stage.
Thank you, Anna. Isn't she wonderful? And what she can do? Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for including me, and thank you all for being here. What I want to do this afternoon is to talk about longevity in the 21st century, these very long lives that we are beginning to live and expect to continue to live. And I've been looking around the room as I've been sitting here today, and I'm going to make some assumptions about your backgrounds, your levels of education, your affluence in the world, and I can tell you, based on those assumptions, that you're going to sail through your 80s, into your 90s, and lots of you are going to live to be 100 and beyond. There you go. And your children? How many of you have had a child or grandchild born since the year 2000? Okay, biodemographers estimate that the majority of those children will live to be over 100 if they were born in the developed world. Anybody have a baby born 2007? Then we can get more precise. 2007, 104. Okay, there you go. And of course, these are averages, and when was the last time your kids were below average? And of course, it's not just the kids. Increasingly, more people are reaching 100 every year as we live in this era of history. In fact, I think greeting cards are a great business opportunity because essentially they end at 100. You can find one often, and there'll be 100-year birthday card, and my Aunt Nell, who died at 102, was really pissed off. I thought that was a very, very bad sign. I'm showing you this slide just because I like it. And it makes the point that many of us are living much longer. Maybe it's young people who need to prepare for us. So, you know that people are living longer. You hear about it all the time. You hear about it on your television sets. You read about it in the newspapers. I think the profundity of the change in life expectancy that we're living through can often go unnoticed in these discussions. So I want to spend just a couple minutes telling you how fast this increase came about. So for most of human history, throughout most of human evolution, life was short, really short. Estimates are somewhere between 18 and 20. And as recently as 5,000 years ago, life expectancy was about 18. And we did see evolution act on age in these early years. Natural selection operated clearly on aging, and it operated in the way that evolution acts at a snail-like pace, and life expectancy got a little longer, a little longer. Again, 5,000 years ago, Bronze Age, life expectancy still 18. 2,000 years later, it's inched up to 22. We were seeing very slow increases in life expectancy, and then we started to see an increase. And what you can see here is life expectancy in the 1600s, 1700s, and you go up to 1900 in the United States, and life expectancy was 47. Now we're talking in a century. Life expectancy went from 47 to 77. This chart is not to scale. So we go through thousands of years, and suddenly, in a century, we nearly double the length of the lives that we're living. And, let me put this in perspective. We added more years to life expectancy in the 20th century than we added through all of human evolution combined. So in historical sense, in a blink of an eye, we nearly doubled the length of our lives. That's the story of longevity, and that's why today, for many of us, very long lives feel a little tense. They are brand new, these lives. And across those very same years that life expectancy was getting longer, fertility rates fell, and they fell dramatically. In 1900, the average American woman had 4.2 children. I like the decimal points here. By the end of that century, fertility rates went to 2.1. So we have half as many children, and we live 30 years longer on average, and that's what created aging societies. So by aging societies, we're talking about the distribution of age in the population. We could have had much larger population and not had aging societies. But it was those factors together that meant that we have an increasingly larger percentage of older people in the population. And to be blunt, when 5% of the population is in a particular category, whatever that category is, from the perspective of society, it doesn't make that much difference how well they're faring or not. But when 20% of the population is in this particular category, in terms of this case, over 65, then it matters, not just to those individuals, but to all of society, how they are functioning. So you may ask, how did this happen? How did we bring about this kind of change? And in a word, the answer is culture. Now, by culture, I'm not referring only to the foods that people eat and the languages they speak, but the crucible that holds science and technology, behavioral practices, and broad social norms. Culture is what created longevity. It's what gave us longevity. As recently as 1950, the distribution of age in the population was pyramid-shaped. Many young ones at the bottom winnowed to a tiny peak at the top of those who survived all the way to old age. That was the distribution of age in the population in the United States. It was also the distribution of age in every country on the planet. We had many more children and increasingly fewer adults who reached advanced ages. In 1900, 25% of babies that were born in the US died before they reached 5. Many more died before they reached 12. And death was common at all ages. Maternal mortality was very high. The primary causes of death were gastrointestinal diseases, usually food-borne, or contagious diseases like the flu. So regardless of your age, people would become exposed to one of those bacteria and would become sick, and a couple weeks later, they died. So death happened throughout life, so much so that death was not particularly strongly associated in people's minds with old age. Death happened to people day in, day out. So what our ancestors did is they said it was intolerable to lose so many young ones. And they invested in culture. They invested in science and in technology and in behavioral changes that improved the odds that those young ones would survive. And because of those efforts, these pyramid-shaped population distributions are being reshaped into rectangles. And if you're the kind of folks who can get chills from biostatistics, my people, these are the ones that should do it, because it means that for the first time in human history, the vast majority of babies are having the opportunity to live out their entire lives. This is an extraordinary accomplishment and a cultural accomplishment. Our ancestors invested in science and discovered the causes of diseases. They went on to create vaccines that could inoculate these young ones against diseases that they would never have to suffer. We didn't stop there. Electricity was discovered and then broadly distributed in the population so that now virtually all households could have refrigeration. And imagine how the safety of the food supply improved when refrigeration was broadly available. We didn't stop there. We implemented broad, systematic disposal of waste, garbage collection. And historians of this era write that you can thank your garbage collectors as much as your physicians for these increases in life expectancy, because we dramatically reduced contagious disease. We didn't stop there. As society, as our ancestors recognized that we had fewer children and the Industrial Revolution was unfolding, they said we need to invest more in these young ones so that they'll be able to work in these new industries. And we put in place in every state in this great nation public education so that all children could learn how to read and write. And today, at this point in history, at some point in adulthood, education is a better predictor of life expectancy than age. That is a stunning observation. That's how we created aging societies. But nobody back then was sitting around thinking, how do we have really old societies? Rather, they were trying to save the lives of the young ones, and in doing so, they made it past these early critical years, and I should say we, are surviving now and living far longer than our ancestors ever would have anticipated. So here we are, standing at a point in human history where 4 and 5 generations will routinely be alive at the same time. In some ways, I think this is a starker, more powerful change even than life expectancy itself. To give you a sense here of how different that is than the way we've lived throughout life, a 20-year-old male today has a better chance of having a living grandmother than a 20-year-old male in 1900 had of having a living mother. This is what's changed. Multiple generations alive at the same time. Now, you might think any species, including humans, would be delighted. Longer lives. It gives us more time to realize our goals, to chase our dreams, to spend time with our loved ones. This is an incredible gift, an incredible accomplishment. But most people aren't dancing in the streets, celebrating, yay, we're going to be old. Policymakers aren't saying, great, we're going to have lots of old citizens and fewer young ones. That has not been the response to longer lives. Why? Well, I don't have a lot of time with you this afternoon, and so I thought I would just make one slide that would summarize the research on aging. So here you go. You can put any variable you like on the y-axis here. Social status, ageism, health, cognitive functioning, and then we've got age here. And this really has been the kind of model of aging that we have relied on throughout history. We assume that as we get older, everything gets worse. Now, I would like to tell you that there's no evidence for this, but of course there are a lot of challenges that we have associated with age. We have a lot of work to do. At the same time, it turns out that this model does not represent aging very well. For one, there's tremendous individual differences in how people age. Today, there are lots of 80-year-olds, probably some here in this room, who are doing fantastic, running the world. We have other people in their 80s who are demented, who are infirm, who really can't live on their own. So we see lots of differentiation in how well people age. In science, variability speaks against inevitability. If a significant percentage of people age very well into their 80s and 90s, then we know it's not age when other people don't. It means it's something associated with age, and we need to be able to find that. But we have also found that many of our beliefs about aging are just wrong. Older people, for example, are not lonely as a group. They're not depressed. They're not worried about dying. In fact, less so than young people for all of those variables. They're happier, less lonely, less anxious, don't care about dying, not nearly as much as the young ones. So a lot of what we've learned in the last 20 years turns out challenges our basic beliefs, and a lot of it speaks to the malleability of aging. One of the most fortunate occurrences that is coinciding with this increase in life expectancy is that it's happening at a time when the potential of science and technology is breathtaking. And we are beginning to see the possibility of making inroads into actually changing the trajectory of the aging process. Now, I'm not talking about immortality for as long as I've been in this field, and it's been a long time. There have been those folks who have claimed that immortality was possible. And science can't tell you that something can't happen, but these folks who've been making that argument, I don't know, they kind of live just outside where the buses run. You know, I mean, this idea that we're going to live forever and go on and on and on, probably not in the cards. At the same time, some of the best scientists on the planet today are making serious inroads into altering the trajectory of aging, slowing the processes associated with aging that lead to so many negative outcomes. So aging, biologically, puts us at risk for virtually all diseases. We see this risk go up across the board. Cancers, heart disease, diabetes, we see the risk go up with age. And what biologists today are working on are ways to prevent that association, to slow that basic biology that's changing that puts us at risk. There is an approach called senolytics. Senolytics are a class of small molecules that can selectively target senescent cells that are just sitting there in our bodies, exuding toxins into our bodies that are contributing to this biological problem that we face as we age. And these agents may be able to selectively kill them and thus keep people healthier longer. There is an approach called parabiosis. My colleague and co-founder of the Stanford Center on Longevity, Tom Rando, is involved in this program of research. Parabiosis refers to the surgical connection of two organisms, mice in this case, together so that they share a common blood supply. And what he finds is that whereas old animals, using their own circulatory system, heal slowly after injury to tissue, heal just as fast as the young animals when they are connected parabiotically. This suggests that it's not aging per se, it's not the cell per se, the tissue per se, it's something in the circulating environment. And biologists are now seeking that protein that we may be able to then deliver to individuals as they age that would keep us healthier, allow us to repair as quickly as we did when we were younger, and thus to function at much higher levels into more advanced ages. Some young people are afraid that we will be running around looking for their blood. And then when this appeared on Silicon Valley, of course, you know, well, around Tom Rando's lab, everybody was real happy. It's like, we're in Silicon Valley. But the real idea here is not to take the blood from young people, but to understand the differences in young blood and old blood so that we may be able to pharmaceutically alter the composition to keep us healthier. We are only beginning to really understand nutrition and nutritional needs across life. We hear every day something about a new diet, about the Mediterranean diet or the paleo diet, all these different kinds of diets. The best evidence for a dietary association to longevity and health is for caloric restriction, eating considerably fewer calories on a daily basis by about 30% reduction in calories and intake. This has been an observation that's been around for quite some time, and most people are not interested. But one of the other things that we're beginning to understand is that time-restricted eating can accomplish many of the same advantages of caloric restriction. Limiting the hours that you eat to 12 hours a day, instead of, for most people, would be more like 15, some of us 20. Limiting that by time, eating the same things, but just limiting it in time, appears to also have metabolic advantages. But we're only beginning to know what we should be eating and what we should be eating at different ages. We don't know for certain what those diets will look like, but it's hard to imagine that the diet a 2-year-old needs is the same as a diet a 95-year-old needs. But we're just now beginning to see real insights into the association of diet and well-being. The best thing you can do today, best evidence for an intervention for a quick fix on aging, is exercise. I think dance is the best form because people tend to enjoy it, and you have to find some kind of exercise that you can do for very long periods of time, stretches throughout your life. But exercise may, in fact, be conferring the same kinds of changes to our metabolic systems as caloric restriction, as parabiosis. We're just beginning to get those kinds of insights. But exercise powerfully influences longevity. And of course, I haven't even begun to talk about the technological advances that are coming on the scene that can help keep us healthier longer. Many of you are wearing watches that are monitoring your steps and other kinds of functions. You can find out how your heart's doing with an Apple Watch. Of course, we have these. I think in the future, we're going to look at these kinds of gadgets in the same way we now today think about mainframe computers as large, chunky hunks where we don't really need to carry all of that weight around. Today, what technologists are working on are something called stretchable polymers that can be attached to skin like a tattoo and that will measure glucose, respiration, cardiovascular functioning, EEG, and integrate this information, convey it electronically to your phone or some other kind of a device, and be able to give you feedback about your current health status. For example, it could tell you you're going to get sick tomorrow. That would be really good information to have. So we're going to see great insights into health as a function of health technologies. And of course, big data are going to allow us to have much more precision about how our behavior and how our habits are influencing our long-term health. I mentioned before that we are just on the cusp of a historical period in which 4 and 5 generations will be alive at the same time. We need to begin to think seriously about ways to connect generations so that the advantages, the strengths of one generation can complement the advantages and strengths of another generation. We stand to benefit enormously by having aging societies. Children stand to benefit enormously. We often hear people say older people are going to gobble up all the resources and leave nothing for the children. Older people may be the resources that children so sorely need. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got to build new social norms. We have to rethink the way we live our lives, but this can be an incredible, incredible gift to children, to young people. Our workforces will change. We hear today a lot about aging workforces, and there's often concern associated with aging workforces. More precisely, what we're living through is a period of age diversification in the workforce. And age-diversified workforces, in many situations and many kinds of companies, appear to be more productive than all young or all old workforces. There was a now famous study done at a BMW plant in Germany where they compared all young work teams on an automotive assembly line, all old work teams, and a mixed work team. And what they find is that the young teams are really fast, and they make a lot of mistakes. The older teams are slower, but they essentially don't make mistakes. You integrate these two age groups, and you end up with higher quality and higher productivity. These things aren't just naturally going to happen, and they aren't going to happen everywhere, but they point to the potential, the possibilities that we're living through today. And of course, in social science, we're also thinking about ways that we can help people live long lives productively. At Stanford, Jeremy Bailenson runs a virtual reality laboratory, and my group does a fair amount of work with him. One observation we have made over time, we social scientists have made, is that people tend not to take care of their future selves. Instead, it's hard to even envision ourselves 20 or 30 years into the future, and so we tend to take care of ourselves like we would take care of strangers. We worked with Bailenson's lab and brought young people into the laboratory, created avatars of their impressions that were either young or old. And then the participants in this study interacted virtually with their same-aged or older self. And at the conclusion of this exercise, we asked them, among many other questions, if you had $1,000 today, how much of that would you allocate to your retirement savings? And those people who had interacted with their aged avatars put more than twice as much into that allocation for retirement. We think we can do this for lots of health behaviors as well, helping us prepare for a long-time future. Because there is nothing in our evolutionary heritage that prepared our brains to save and plan and delay reward for 20 or 30 years into the future. Those who did are not among our ancestors. By the way, we also found in this work that when the avatar is sad, the people don't save as much as when the avatar is happy. So when you expose people to positive images of their futures, they're more likely to prepare than they are when they see a negative image of their futures. And of course, I mentioned older people are happier than younger and middle-aged people, so this is not misleading young people in any way. So we're living a lot longer. And we're finding ways to improve our health, our function, our emotional well-being through those longer lives that we're living. The question becomes, what are we going to do with these longer lives? Where are we going to put the extra years? How can we use longer lives to improve quality of life, not just in old age, but at all ages? We launched at the Stanford Center on Longevity last September a major initiative we're calling the New Map of Life. And in preparation for a meeting that launched this effort, We gathered lots of different statistics and facts about what happens when in life. When are people working? When are they raising children? When are they getting married? When are they going to college? And we charted them by age. And what we observed is that there's way too much going on in the middle. Some of you may have noticed this. And then there's like nothing at the end. We need to build a culture that supports century-long lives all the way through. And we need to think about where to put these added years, not just tack them on at the end, which is what we have done and is the least imaginative thing we could possibly do with a gift of time. I ask people regularly, if you had 30 extra years of life, where would you put them? And no one has ever said, I'd make old age longer. But that's what we've done. So how do we create a new map? Well, we gathered 50 experts for 2 days, and we charged them first with just envisioning what a healthy, happy, satisfying century-long life looks like, because you cannot achieve what you cannot envision. And we're not doing enough envisioning about what long, successful lives can look like. And then the next step was to say what we would have to do to get there. How do we build that? How does the built environment change? How do social norms change? How does the education system change? How does work life change? And we began to think through the many different changes that would need to occur to really be able to make use of this gift of time. The next step for us is to begin in September, which we will, a postdoctoral fellows program where we're appointing postdocs for 2 years to develop reports within one domain that needs to change, from healthcare delivery to physical fitness to education to early childhood, intergenerational relationships, and they will develop reports on the state of things today, where they need to go, ideally, to support century-long lives, and then what are the business opportunities, the need for industry, for solutions, for policies, for changes in norms that would help us get there. And we interweave these reports, and we have ultimately a living document we call the new map of life. We are gathering a global group in September in Bellagio to begin to take this global. One of our main objectives here is to shift away from this idea, this kind of white-knuckled approach to longer aging lives, where the discussion's mostly about coping, to one that's about solving problems and addressing challenges and making these added years work for all of us. There is no better place to work on this particular topic and challenge than Silicon Valley, where we believe we can, and we regularly do, things that people couldn't previously imagine. I began by talking about the babies. I'm going to close with talking about the babies again, the little ones. The next time you drive by a schoolyard and you stop and you see those little ones, they're swinging on the tire swings and climbing on the play structures, I want you to know that you're looking at the first centenarians of the 22nd century. They are here, they're living among us, and it is our job, it's our duty, to build a world that will support them all the way through. And I assure you that the greatest risk of failure is setting the bar too low. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I love what you said. You cannot achieve what you can. So what do you envision when you turn 100?
Oh, a really big birthday party first.
A really big birthday party
Yeah.
first.
Great music, lots of dancing.
Okay.
Lots of food.
Okay.
And maybe to eat once 24 hours solid.
And some exercise as well. 'Cause that's
Well,
important.
there'll be a lot of dancing.
There we go.
You
Excellent.
need dancing if you're going to live to be 100.
Super. Let's give it up for Laura again.
Thank you.